The holographic display flickered in the sterile conference room aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, casting an eerie blue glow across Ambassador Kate Miller's determined face. Across from her sat 3 representatives of the most powerful species in known space: the crystalline Vorthen with their prismatic bodies that refracted light like living diamonds, the insectoid Krex whose compound eyes glittered with cold intelligence, and the gaseous Nethys that floated in their containment suits like sentient clouds. Ambassador Miller, the Vorthen delegate's voice chimed like breaking glass. Your species has had adequate time to consider our generous offer. The mineral wealth of your world, particularly the rare earth deposits, are required for the continued expansion of galactic civilization. Kate straightened in her chair, her hands steady despite the weight of 8 billion lives resting on her shoulders. With respect, Counselor Zenth, those minerals aren't just resources to us. They're the foundation of our entire technological infrastructure. Without them, human civilization would collapse within a generation. The Krex delegate's mandibles clicked dismissively. Irrelevant. Lesser species have always made way for their betters. Your primitive understanding of physics and biology makes you unsuitable custodians of such valuable materials. Primitive? Kate's voice carried an edge of steel that surprised even her. We've achieved interstellar communication, developed fusion power, and created artificial intelligence systems. We're not the Stone Age species you encountered 50 years ago. The Nethys representative's form swirled within its containment suit, its translated voice carrying an air of bored superiority. Child, we were building Dyson spheres when your ancestors were discovering fire. Your technological advancement is impressive for such a young species, but it remains fundamentally inferior to our own. Kate had prepared for this moment her entire diplomatic career, but the casual dismissal still stung. She leaned forward, meeting each delegate's gaze in turn. Then let us prove our worth. Give us a chance to demonstrate what humanity can contribute to the galactic community as equals, not subjects. The silence that followed stretched like a taut wire. Finally, the Vorthen delegate's crystalline form shifted, light refracting through its body in patterns that spoke of amusement. Equals, you misunderstand your position entirely. This is not a negotiation between peers. This is a directive from your superiors. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. Free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. The weight of those words settled over Kate like a shroud. She had spent months preparing arguments about human potential, about the value of diversity in galactic civilization, about the contributions Earth could make. None of it mattered. The decision had been made before she ever entered this room. How long do we have? She asked quietly. 30 solar rotations of your home world, the Krex delegate responded. Sufficient time to organize the evacuation of your population to designated resettlement worlds. You will find them quite habitable, though perhaps less comfortable than your current circumstances. Kate stood slowly, her diplomat's training warring with the rage building in her chest. And if we refuse? The 3 delegates exchanged what might have been glances among species capable of such expressions. The Nethys spoke first, its voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Then you will share the fate of the Corvani, the Telthic, and the 17 other species who chose defiance over wisdom. Your world will be cleansed, your civilization erased, and the minerals will be harvested regardless. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Kate had heard whispers of those vanished civilizations, species that had simply disappeared from galactic records with no explanation offered by the Council. I need to consult with my government, Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, the Vorthen delegate replied with what sounded like magnanimity. We are not unreasonable. But understand this clearly, Ambassador Miller, this conversation is a courtesy extended to acknowledge your species' recent technological progress. The outcome remains fixed. As Kate gathered her materials and prepared to leave, her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, though that certainly coursed through her veins, but from something else entirely. A cold, calculating fury that reminded Her why humans had clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain, despite being outmatched by faster, stronger, and more naturally armed predators. The shuttle ride back to Earth passed in contemplative silence. Kate stared out at the stars, no longer seeing them as destinations for human exploration, but as witnesses to what might be humanity's final chapter. Unless somehow they could find a way to survive what was coming, the greatest civilizations in galactic history had tried to stand against the Council and failed. But those civilizations had never been human. Dr. James Park barely looked up from his microscope as his assistant burst through the laboratory doors. The xenobiology lab at the Geneva Research Facility hummed with activity even at 3 in the morning, a testament to the urgency that had gripped Earth since Ambassador Miller's return from the Council ship. "Doctor, you need to see the news feeds," Alex said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The President's addressing the world in an hour. They're going to announce the Council's ultimatum." James finally raised his head, his dark eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I heard 30 days to evacuate 8 billion people to alien resettlement camps." He gestured to the collection of tissue samples spread across his workstation. "Which is why I've been analyzing every piece of alien biological material we've collected over the past 5 decades, looking for what exactly? A weakness." James stood and stretched, his back protesting after hours hunched over his equipment. "Every species has vulnerabilities, Alex. It's basic evolutionary biology. The question is whether we can find something that applies to all 3 Council species before they turn our world into an asteroid field." Alex moved closer to examine the samples. Fragments of Vorthan crystal matrix, preserved Crex tissue samples, and even a small container of Nethys atmospheric composition that had been painstakingly collected during previous encounters. "Any luck?" "Actually, yes." James's fatigue seemed to lift as he shifted into teaching mode. "All 3 species share something remarkable. Their neural systems operate on electromagnetic frequencies that would be instantly lethal to human consciousness." "What do you mean?" James pulled up a series of brain scans on his display wall. "Look at these patterns. Human neural activity clusters around specific frequency ranges that allow us to process everything from visible light to complex emotional states. But these alien species?" He highlighted different sections of the scans. "Their consciousness operates in frequencies that human brains learned to filter out millions of years ago." "Filter out?" "Background electromagnetic radiation from cosmic sources, solar interference, even planetary magnetic field fluctuations. Our ancestors who couldn't ignore these frequencies suffered constant neural overload headaches, seizures, eventual death. Natural selection eliminated them from the gene pool." James's voice grew more excited as he explained. "But for these alien species, those same frequencies are essential for basic neural function." Alex frowned, trying to follow the implications. "So their brains work on wavelengths that would kill us, and ours work on wavelengths that would ... Theoretically. Kill them, yes. Their nervous systems have no mechanism to filter out our neural frequencies, because they never evolved in an environment where such filtering was necessary." The laboratory door opened again, and Dr. Lisa Chun entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, and looking as exhausted as James felt. The physicist had been working in parallel with the biology team, exploring the theoretical applications of James's discoveries. "Please tell me you have good news, Lisa," James said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Better than good." She activated her own display, showing a complex array of mathematical equations. "I've been modeling the energy requirements for broadcasting human neural frequencies on a large scale. It's not only possible, it's surprisingly efficient." "How large a scale?" Alex asked. Lisa's smile was grim. "Planetary. Maybe even system-wide if we can build the right kind of amplification network." James set down his coffee, his mind racing. "We're talking about weaponizing human consciousness itself." "More than that," Lisa replied. "We're talking about turning our greatest perceived weakness, our primitive neural architecture, into the ultimate advantage. Every time the Council species dismisses us as mentally inferior, they're actually acknowledging that our brains work differently than theirs." "Different enough to kill them? Based on your biological analysis?" "Yes. Their neural networks would collapse within minutes of exposure to properly amplified human brainwave patterns. The three scientists stood in silence, the weight of the discovery settling over them. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to show on the horizon. In less than 30 days, the most powerful military force in galactic history would arrive to claim their world. "We need to contact the Defense Department," James said finally. "And we need to do it now." Lisa nodded. "I'll start working on the technical specifications for the broadcast array. If we're going to build this thing, we'll need every available resource and the best engineers on the planet." "What are we calling it?" Alex asked. James looked back at his alien tissue samples, thinking about the casual dismissal humanity had received from the Council, the assumption that a primitive species could never pose a threat to their technological superiority. "The neural disruptor," he said. "Because sometimes the best way to win is to make your enemy's strength into their fatal weakness." As the sun rose over Geneva, 3 humans began planning the most audacious gamble in their species history. General Mike Torres stood before the largest holographic display ever constructed, watching red dots inch closer to the solar system's outer edge. Each dot represented a Council warship, and there were more of them than Earth had missiles, fighters, and defensive platforms combined. "Status report," he called out to the bustling command center buried 3 miles beneath the Colorado mountains. 237 confirmed vessels, reported Colonel Jane Kim from her station. Long-range sensors indicate at least 40 Dreadnought-class ships, plus support fleets. Their formation suggests they're expecting minimal resistance. Torres nodded grimly. By conventional military assessment, they were absolutely right. Earth's space-based defenses might delay the invasion by hours, perhaps a day if they were extraordinarily lucky. The Council's technological advantage was simply overwhelming. "Any word from the Neural Disruptor project?" "Dr. Park's team finished the biological testing phase yesterday," Kim replied. "All 3 Council species showed complete neural collapse when exposed to amplified human brainwave patterns. Dr. Chun reports the broadcast array is 70% complete. 70%. Torres rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of command settling heavier on his shoulders. "How long until it's operational?" 8 days, sir. Maybe 6 if they push the construction crews around the clock." Torres looked up at the tactical display again. The red dots had moved perceptibly closer, even in the few minutes they'd been talking. "They'll be here in 12 days. That gives us a 4-day window if everything goes perfectly. And if it doesn't go perfectly? Then we die fighting instead of dying on our knees." Torres turned away from the display and walked to the communication center. "Get me a secure line to President Walsh. It's time to discuss evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel." 3,000 miles away, Dr. Lisa Chun stood atop a mountain in the Swiss Alps, watching teams of engineers install the final components of humanity's most desperate gamble. The Neural Disruptor looked nothing like the sleek weapons of science fiction. It was a sprawling complex of transmission towers, quantum processors, and electromagnetic amplifiers that covered nearly 10 square miles of pristine alpine landscape. "The irony is beautiful, isn't it?" James Park approached from behind, his breath forming clouds in the thin mountain air. "What irony? We're building the most advanced weapon in human history, and the Council still thinks we're too primitive to pose a threat." James gestured toward the construction site below. "Their scouts have been monitoring our military preparations, the missile deployments, the fighter squadrons mobilizing, the defensive platforms going online. But this?" He pointed to the seemingly innocent collection of towers. "To their sensors, it probably looks like a communications array." Lisa smiled despite the circumstances. "Let them think that. The longer they underestimate us, the better our chances." A young engineer approached, tablet in hand and excitement barely contained. "Dr. Chun, the quantum processors are online and synchronized. We're ready to begin the first full power test." "What's our target?" Lisa asked. "Preserved tissue samples from all 3 Council species, housed in isolation chambers 1 kilometer from the primary array." The engineer's voice carried a mixture of scientific fascination and grim determination. "If this works, we'll know within minutes." Lisa and James followed the engineer to the control bunker, a reinforced structure built into the mountainside. Inside, Dozens of technicians monitored banks of equipment while massive displays showed energy readings, neural frequency patterns, and biological response data. "Begin the test," Lisa commanded. The hum of machinery filled the bunker as the neural disruptor came to life. On the displays, energy levels spiked as the system began broadcasting amplified human neural frequencies across a focused beam directed at the test chamber. "Vorthen sample showing immediate cellular disruption," called out one technician. "Krex tissue exhibiting complete neural network collapse," reported another. "Nethys atmospheric composition destabilizing rapidly." Within 3 minutes, all 3 alien tissue samples had been reduced to inert matter. The neural frequencies that sustained human consciousness had proven absolutely lethal to their alien counterparts. "It works," James whispered, staring at the readouts in amazement. "Better than we hoped," Lisa agreed. "The effect is almost instantaneous, and the energy requirements are well within our projections." An alarm chimed softly, and General Torres's voice filled the bunker through the communication system. "All stations, this is command. Council forward scouts have crossed the orbit of Pluto. Estimated time to engagement range, 10 days. Lisa looked around the bunker at the faces of the engineers and technicians who had worked without sleep for weeks to make this moment possible. Every one of them understood that they were racing against annihilation, that the margin for error had effectively shrunk to 0. "How long for full deployment?" she asked her chief engineer. 6 days for basic operational status. 8 days for full power and planetary coverage. "Then we work for 6 days straight," Lisa declared. "No breaks, no rest shifts, no margin for error. Humanity's survival depends on making this deadline." As night fell over the Alps, the neural disruptor construction site became a hive of round-the-clock activity. Floodlights illuminated the work areas while teams of engineers raced to complete humanity's most ambitious project. Above them, the stars looked down with cold indifference, offering no comfort to the species that was about to discover whether intelligence and determination could triumph over overwhelming technological superiority. The countdown had begun. The Council Armada dropped out of hyperspace with the precision of a perfectly orchestrated symphony. 237 vessels materialized in Earth's outer solar system, their hulls gleaming with the metallic perfection of technology. Millennia beyond human capability. Admiral Korthek of the Vorthen fleet gazed through his crystalline command chamber at the small, blue world that had dared to defy the galactic order. "Scan the primitive defenses," he commanded, his voice resonating through the ship's neural network like chimes in a crystal cathedral. "Multiple missile platforms detected," reported his tactical officer. "Approximately 300 fighter craft in defensive formation. Several orbital weapons stations of crude design." Korthek's form shifted, light refracting through his body in patterns that indicated amusement. "Pathetic. Their entire military could not challenge a single one of our escort frigates." On the bridge of the Krex flagship, Commander Zixith flexed his razor-sharp mandibles while studying the tactical display. His compound eyes caught every detail of Earth's defensive arrangements, analyzing them with the cold precision of a predator. Evaluating prey. "The humans have positioned their forces to defend the primary population centers," he observed. "Standard defensive doctrine for an inferior species. They still believe this will be a conventional engagement." The Nethys fleet commander, existing as a swirling consciousness within her atmospheric containment suit, reviewed the intelligence gathered by their advanced scouts. "Our psychological analysis indicates they will surrender once they witness the destruction of their military forces. Humans appear to value individual survival over abstract principles." "Then let us demonstrate the futility of resistance," Admiral Korthek declared. "Begin the attack." The Council fleet moved forward. Like an unstoppable tide, their weapon systems charging for what they anticipated would be a brief and decisive engagement. Earth's defensive forces scrambled to meet them, knowing they faced impossible odds, but determined to buy precious time for the civilian evacuation efforts. On the Neural Disruptor Control Mountain, Dr. Lisa Chun watched the tactical displays with growing tension. The alien fleet was still 2 hours away from optimal broadcast range, but the human defenses were already taking devastating losses. "We're losing the orbital platforms," reported General Torres through the communication link. The Council weapons are beyond anything we anticipated. Our return fire isn't even scratching their hull armor. How much more time do you need? Torres asked. Lisa looked at her chief engineer, who held up 5 fingers, then 4, then 3. As final connections were completed across the transmission array. 3 minutes, she called back. Give us 3 more minutes. Roger that. All remaining units, concentrate fire on the lead dreadnoughts, everything you have. The space around Earth erupted in violent light as human missiles and energy weapons struck uselessly against Council shields. But the desperate attack accomplished its purpose. The alien commanders focused entirely on the conventional battle, never noticing the strange energy patterns beginning to emanate from a mountain in the Swiss Alps. Neural disruptor at full power, announced the chief engineer. Broadcasting on all frequencies associated with human consciousness. Range to target? Still at maximum effective distance, but within theoretical parameters. Lisa held her breath as the invisible wave of amplified human neural energy raced outward at the speed of light, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of an entire species. Aboard the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Korthek was preparing to deliver the final ultimatum when something impossible happened. His crystalline consciousness, evolved over millions of years to process information at frequencies incompatible with carbon-based life, suddenly encountered patterns it had never experienced and could not filter. The sensation began as a whisper, then grew to a roar. Human emotions, human thoughts, human dreams and fears and hopes, all amplified to levels that overwhelmed his neural architecture completely. His command chamber filled with discordant light as his body lost cohesion, the crystalline matrix that housed his consciousness dissolving into chaos. Across the Council fleet, the same fate befell every alien consciousness. Krek's warriors collapsed as their compound neural networks overloaded. Nethys commanders dispersed into random atmospheric patterns as their gaseous forms lost all organizational structure. Thousands of years of technological advancement meant nothing against a weapon that attacked the very foundation of their existence. All Council vessels showing power failures, reported Colonel Kim in amazement. They're dead in space. Confirmed, Lisa replied, watching the readings from the neural disruptor. Complete neural collapse across all 3 species. The effect appears to be permanent. General Torres's voice carried a note of wonder that he couldn't quite suppress. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we just won the most one-sided victory in military history. On the tactical display, the red dots representing the Council armada had gone dark. 237 of the most advanced warships ever constructed now drifted powerless through space, their crews reduced to biological matter incapable of conscious thought. Dr. James Park, watching from the mountain facility, spoke. The words that would echo through human history. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from being underestimated. The neural disruptor continued its broadcast, ensuring that any surviving Council forces would meet the same fate if they approached Earth. For the first time in the planet's history, humanity had achieved absolute military superiority over a galactic superpower. The age of human defiance had begun. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, as historians were already calling it, Ambassador Kate Miller stood once again in a diplomatic conference room. But this time, the dynamics had shifted dramatically. The holographic projectors displayed not the images of 3 Supreme Council species, but rather the nervous faces of their designated successors, younger aliens who had been stationed far enough from Earth during the neural disruptor activation to survive with their consciousness intact. Ambassador Miller, the junior Vorthan delegate, began, his crystalline form flickering with patterns that spoke of deep uncertainty. The remnants of the Council formally request an audience to discuss ... new arrangements. Kate leaned back in her chair, studying the 3 aliens with the measured gaze of someone who no longer had to plead for her species' survival. Behind her stood General Torres and Dr. James Park, their presence serving as a quiet reminder of humanity's newfound capabilities. "I'm listening," she said simply. The Krek's representative, a minor functionary who had been promoted far beyond his original station, struggled to find words. "The previous leadership made errors in judgment regarding your species' capabilities. We wish to establish more equitable relationships moving forward." "Equitable," Kate repeated, tasting the word. An interesting choice of terms. 6 months ago, your predecessors used words like primitive and inferior when discussing humanity. The Nephis delegate's gaseous form swirled anxiously within its containment suit. We understand that circumstances have changed. The neural disruptor has fundamentally altered the balance of power in this region of the galaxy. Kate glanced at Dr. Park, who nodded slightly. They had spent considerable time discussing this moment, weighing the implications of humanity's sudden ascension from galactic insignificance to regional superpower. Let me be clear about our position, Kate said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone backed by overwhelming force. Earth is no longer available for resource extraction. Our mineral wealth, our scientific knowledge, and our territorial sovereignty are non-negotiable. Of course, the Vorthan delegate agreed quickly. We would never presume. However, Tate continued, cutting off the aliens' protestations, humanity is not interested in becoming a galactic tyrant. We didn't develop the neural disruptor to conquer others, but to ensure our own survival. General Torres stepped forward. The weapon remains active and will respond automatically to any significant Council military presence within 50 light-years of Earth. This is not a threat, it's simply a reality you need to factor into your strategic planning. The 3 alien delegates exchanged glances, their body language conveying a mixture of fear and grudging respect. The casual mention of 50 light-years of protected space drove home just how completely the situation had reversed. Dr. Park cleared his throat. From a scientific perspective, we're actually quite interested in establishing research partnerships. The biological diversity represented by your species could lead to fascinating discoveries, provided those partnerships are truly collaborative. You would share the neural disruptor technology? The Crex delegate asked, hope creeping into his voice. Absolutely not, Kate replied firmly. But we're open to joint research projects in fields that benefit all parties. Medicine, physics, engineering, areas where our different evolutionary paths might complement each other. The Nephis delegate's form brightened noticeably. This is more generous than we dared hope. It's practical, Kate corrected. Humanity is new to the galactic stage. We need allies, not subjects. Species that choose to work with us rather than against us will find us remarkably reasonable partners. She stood and walked to the conference room's observation window, gazing out at the stars that no longer seemed filled with threats. The Council's mistake was assuming that technological superiority automatically translated to evolutionary superiority. You forgot that intelligence takes many forms, and that survival often depends more on adaptability than raw power. Back on Earth, the neural disruptor continued its vigilant broadcast from the Swiss Alps. The facility had been expanded and hardened, with backup systems installed across multiple continents. Humanity would never again face extinction at the whim of self-appointed galactic overlords. Dr. Lisa Chun, now director of the Global Defense Initiative, reviewed the daily status reports from monitoring stations throughout human space. Early warning networks had detected 17 different alien species conducting long-range reconnaissance of Earth's defenses. None had approached closer than 100 light-years, a distance that spoke to the respect humanity had earned through its demonstration of the neural disruptor's effectiveness. In laboratories around the world, human scientists worked alongside alien researchers who had volunteered to study on Earth despite the risks. The knowledge exchange had already yielded breakthrough discoveries in quantum mechanics, biological engineering, and stellar cartography. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity itself. The species that had once looked to the stars with wonder and hope, then with fear and desperation, now gazed upward with the quiet confidence of survivors who had faced annihilation and emerged stronger. The neural disruptor had been built as a weapon of last resort, designed by desperate scientists racing against impossible odds. But it had become something greater, a declaration that intelligence, determination, and the refusal to surrender could triumph over any advantage that raw technology might provide. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon had not been the device itself, but the will to build it when building seemed impossible, and the wisdom to use it not for conquest but for the guarantee of freedom. The stars still held mysteries and wonders beyond imagination. But now, humanity would explore them as equals rather than refugees, pioneers rather than prisoners. The age of human independence had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.